Welcome to Desi Return Diaries, Embracing Home Again, the podcast that shares personal journeys and expert insights on returning to India. I'm your host, Avinash Pedi, here to guide and inspire you on your Desi return journey. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Desi Return. Today I'm really excited to have Rajiv and Meena on our show. So Rajiv and Meena were in US for 20 years before moving back to India, and they have been living here for almost 10 years. That's quite a lot of time to get a lot of insights in depth in terms of the lifestyle here in India, adjusting here, and I'm really looking forward to the show. With that, welcome Rajiv and Meena to the show.
Thanks, Avinash.
Thanks, Avinash.
That's great. So, Rajiv and Meena, if you can share a bit of your background and what motivated you to return back to India, I think that would be very helpful.
Okay, so both of us are in IT, what motivated to, so our background is in IT, both of us work in different.
He went for his master's and then he joined the workforce there in the US itself. I had a job here, and when I got married, I moved. So he stayed there for longer than I have. But I moved through work and he went to do his master's, and that's how we transitioned there. And then that's sort of where our journey was there. And then we stayed there for a long time, and then we had always considered.
So this was a consideration, and then so I'll put it this way. So I was 43 when I moved back. So this is like kind of like a scenario like there's like. So I had my parents' health had some setbacks. It turned out that I needed to be here. So then we took stock of like given that I felt that I could there was a benefit to them from me being here. I thought let's see. I felt that there is a narrow window in which you can make this opportunity. Again, talking to people, the sense I got was, if you want to make this work, make the transition when your kids can, when your children can adapt. So that was, I felt that let's give this a go. So we moved here, not much of expectations. So we kind of like kept it open, took it one day at a time, and 10 years later, here we are. So it's kind of like anticlimactic, but we just took it one day at a time.
Okay, that's great. So I know 20 years is not a short duration. It's like almost a good formative, like it's a good life, right, for anyone to live abroad. So I know you kind of mentioned about some of the key trigger points, like anything, your parents' health and before the kids are at certain age. But have you had this in the back of the mind that you always want to return back to India, or is it something that kind of evolved later in the life, like as you keep staying there in US? And then once, that is one question, and then there is a certain point where you made a decision, right? Like, let's say, in a year or 6 months beforehand or something, how did you plan about the move? Like, from a financial, logistics, career wise. So if you can peel it a little bit, that would be helpful, because for somebody who is living there for 20 years, it's a big decision. And, has that been all along the process? And then, what was your planning throughout the process?
So I'll put it this way. So moving back was something we considered. It was always under consideration, but the exact point was like, you want to move back when the move makes an impact, right? You should move back at a point where you think that you can get the maximum impact out of that move, right? So for us, in my case, it turned out to be at that time. And in terms of like planning and the logistics, it's actually, honestly, all of that was all Meena. I mean, this is like 100% Meena. So she did, so she actually.
But he did tell me a year ago, like we decided, we moved back in, so when we moved back a year ago, we decided that when my daughter transitions to the next school grade, like when she was going from first grade to second grade, we thought we would try one school. I think school finishes in the US by May and June first week. And school starts here by June second week or something, right? Roughly, that's how the school system works. So we decided we will use that window to move back and see how it will work out. So a year back, we sort of roughly arrived
1 year back.
1 year back, we decided, okay, next year we should put this into action. And so we had that 1 year time frame where we could slowly work through, like you said, the logistics of moving back, our finances, what do we do about our jobs and things like that. But since we had, like he said, since it was always something under consideration, I think it helped because this was a thought at the back of our mind. So that was something that was there for several years before, but it was not like something where we, our investments and everything over the last 1 year, we sort of adjusted it so that when we came back here, we could operate everything online from here itself and do things like that. That's sort of how we managed the move. So it also helped that my mother-in-law actually looked at the school, which is right across our house, and said that, see, they have their admissions opening and they are willing to send this entrance test papers to her school in the US. And if they can actually make her fill it out and scan it back to us, you don't even have to travel for the entrance test. So that also made it easier because some schools would expect in India that you travel back and you make the child go through all of that, right? So this was also a newer school. So the toilets and, those things matter to a child that age, right? Because it all looked nice and clean. My mother-in-law checked it out for us and said, see, it's nice, it's clean. I think she will be able to adjust. So it helped that the school sent some entrance papers and my daughter, it was a very basic test in some basic English and math questions. And she wrote it and she cleared it. And of course, we had to pay some management fees upfront to the schools. And we also consciously decided, let's not put her in an international school here, which I think if you have older kids, you may have to do that because they have.
Yeah. So that's really where the complications of like, moving later come into play, because like usually when, if you move when you're like in middle school, then things like, how the kids, you're always concerned about whether the kids are like, getting a smooth education. You want to make sure that their education is like, as
the transition.
There's no friction. Everything is like smooth. You want to make it. As parents, we all want to give the best education to our kids, right? So that's So
the timing of the move was largely based on when the school year ends there and the school year starts here. We had that flexibility, but we knew that given his parents' health situation, if we try to postpone that, even that flexibility won't be there, and we may have to do some kind of an emergency adjustment, which will not work well for everybody. So we felt that when we had the window where we could, utilize it properly, let's utilize it. And if it doesn't work out, we will think about alternatives 2 years later or something, because he had a citizenship at that point of time and I had my permanent residency. So we thought, okay, we will give this and we'll be open-minded about this and we'll give it a shot for 2 to 3 years. We'll make sure that his family situation improves, and should things really not work out after 2 to 3 years, then we can always consider relocating back to the US, but that didn't happen. So that's why you're having us here.
Yeah. So one thing, Minash, was that, if you ask me now, so my dad passed away about 2 months ago. He was 86. So I got to spend 10 years with him, and I got to spend, so the good thing is that when I look back right now, I feel that I feel really good about the fact that I was there when they needed me, and I feel good about the fact that I got to spend a lot of time with my dad. So that is something that looking back, I feel that, oh, thank God I did this, because now I can see that I have a lot of good memories about the time we spent, and like the fact that. I think had I not done it, I would have felt bad about it.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Again, sorry for the loss of your father. But again, I think, the key thing is, spending the quality time with the parents, and that's the main objective. And seems like, able to do that is, so immensible, right? I mean, nothing to
Yeah,
regret,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
I know you kind
exactly.
of
And
touched a
that is
little
like,
bit. Yeah, you kind of
yeah,
touched a
great.
little bit on the schooling side. Maybe before we dive into that a little bit, I just want to check if you are okay in terms of the career transition, right? So I know you had about a year to plan. You kind of
Mhm.
touched a little bit on the logistics. You both mentioned that you both are in IT, working there for a long time. So have you looked at like an internal transfer, or have you like left the jobs and tried to find some jobs here? So if you can talk a little bit about your career planning in terms of the move, that would be very helpful too.
Yeah, mine was an internal transfer. So, and that was also a lucky thing, right? I was thinking I'll have to come back to India and look for a job. But it just so happened that 6 months before we moved, my startup got acquired by a larger company in the US. And that larger company had operations in Chennai. So the management said, why don't you go back there and work, and we'll work something out, right? So that turned out to be a nice surprise. It was not planned, but it turned out that way. So I'm happy for that. In his case, since his family situation was a little difficult, he decided to take a different path, and I'll let him talk about it.
So I've been up. So basically, I'm like, so I'm 53 now. So it's I've spent a lot of time in the industry. So like the first 10 years, I spent doing vanilla flavored software development. Then I made this transition to data science. So it turned out that so that was about the time that I had so I was a contractor. So basically, I lived in the Washington D.C. area. So I was a federal government contractor. So I did. When I decided to move back, I had this was also one of the I thought it was like a good time for me. I mean, it turned out to be that from a career standpoint, I also wanted to do a PhD. That was also something that was always in the back of my mind, and I thought, okay, now is the time to get that in as well. So as soon as I got back, I got that. So I took 5 years to do that. So I got that off my bucket list. I'm very happy again when I look back. That is something that gave me a lot of satisfaction and gave me a lot of. I mean, again, I'm glad I did that. So after that, I kind of like again moved back into. By then, I think because of COVID, remote work became normalized. So I transitioned to a remote work arrangement. So that's kind of my story.
Got it. So seems like I think yours is a little bit unusual. You followed the track of the passion and went with your bucket list, did the PhD, which is kudos to you, to take it off and complete it, and doing it at, at that stage in the life. And so congratulations on that. So I think that's helpful. So with that said, are there any tips or anything? I know you have been living here for 10 years. You have seen the work-life balance, the lifestyle of the the working culture in India versus the working culture in US. Anything that you can talk about the culture is one aspect. The second one is also if somebody is like planning to move, and you might have seen the shift or change in India in terms of the employment, in terms of the opportunities. Anything that you can talk, what are the current opportunities, people who are thinking to move back, how they should approach, what they should, from you as an experienced veteran, IT, folks, if you can share any insights, that would be very helpful.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, so in terms of the insights, I think you should be very clear about why you want to move. Okay, you have to be very, very clear about it. And you have to have an open mind. See, you're moving from a developed nation to a developing country. So things are very volatile here, right? Yes, it is your own culture. You were raised in this culture, but you were away from it for so long. So there is going to be some reverse culture shock that will catch you off guard, especially for the first 1 or 2 years, right? You can't help but keep comparing notes with how your life back in the US was. And if you sort of look at everything in India as some downgraded version of what you got in the US, then you won't be able to make a successful transition. you have to keep in mind the reality in India is it's a developing country. It's a very rich and vibrant country. And there's a lot, I mean, food and culture is a big plus, if you ask me. And being close to your family, at least those were big pluses for us, right? So in terms of our jobs, we were open. Like since we had stayed for that long there, and we realized that when we came back here, the opportunities can be mixed. It turned out to be a nicer surprise because both of us got good opportunities after we moved back here. But that's not something which because when we were in the US, we were like, oh, we're not sure what we're going to get, how it's going to be. Maybe all the jobs are in Bangalore, whereas we are in Chennai. So how is that going to work out? We had all those kind of concerns, but I think some of that was easily put to rest. But you should be very clear about your move, and you should have an open-minded thing. And if you think about all the pluses why you came back and you constantly keep reiterating that in your mind, it will help you have a positive mindset towards getting adjusted to life here. Same with your children. I think you should let them have an open mind, right? Before they come back here itself, we shouldn't be conditioning them about India being dirty or things like that, which sometimes if you start doing that when they come back here, they may take a little bit of time to transition. But if you have an open mind, you'll automatically be able to pass on that open mind to your children. And I think the whole adjustment becomes a lot better through that.
Yeah. So, any specific insights in terms of the career opportunities currently in India for somebody like thinking about a transition? So more on the career growth. I mean, kind of opportunities here in India right now. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm still working for a US organization, captive here in India, like they call it, right? So it's been like I'm in systems development and application development. I'm an architect right now. So here, and it's I think Bangalore and the Delhi NCR region. When I go and look at jobs there, it seems to be abundant when I look at these the opportunities there. I think in Chennai and Pune and all, it tends to be I think there are still opportunities, but you've got to look and see whether you land what you really like. But I think if you're in IT, generally India has a good, vibrant job market. And I think the Indian startup scene over the last 10 years has exploded. I mean, you keep hearing about so many people, which was all unheard of maybe in the early 2000s. Yeah. I think you hear all these promising stories where people want to try out their own thing. And, there's much more entrepreneurship that's there right now, which I think is a really good thing. So if you have a lot of energy and you want to try out something, I think even the venture capital funding and all that is probably more accessible right now. So it's I would say it's pretty positive at this point in terms of somebody who wants to come back and they have a lot of energy. I think there's a lot of opportunities.
So the one thing I would say is that, so here's how I would summarize this, Avinash. No matter what, whether you live in the US, whether you live in India, no matter where you live, life is not perfect. There are going to be, in terms of your career, in terms of your, in terms of like home life, whatever. Life is not perfect. So the real question is, when you're contrasting two situations, it's important to understand that whether it's situation A or situation B, both are bad. It's not like one is like uniquely better or unique. Both have pluses and minuses. And since you made that, hopefully you made that. When you make the change and when you made a choice, hopefully you made a choice fully conscious of the fact that this is not perfect too. Neither was the previous one. So but remember yourself and learn to. It's more important, or at least the way that I felt, the way I approached it was to if you feel getting bogged down by things that adversely affect you, to remind yourself of why you made this transition and why you to recall the positives that brought you here. And always though, in each one, for each person, the positives are different. It could be food, it could be time with your parents, it could be, it could be doing the activities that you enjoy here. So that would kind of like set things again in perspective. So, that, yeah, this is why I did this. And it makes you enjoy those things better. And usually when you reset your perspective that way, things usually, the 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 nostalgia actually goes away. You realize that you did this for a reason, and and things fall into place.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So, I mean, I think just a quick summary of what I heard is, I think, in terms of the career opportunities, especially for somebody from IT, there are quite abundant. It can vary from a city to city, but it's very, very abundant. And also, the startup ecosystem is very much thriving in the last 10 years in terms of the VC funding, the entrepreneurship, and so on. And the key thing is, no place is perfect. I mean, it just depends on what your key priorities are, and then you just choose with it, and you have to manage the other minor things that comes along the way. There is no other anything. So I know you kind of touched a little bit about your daughter, I think, who joined the school at the second grade, and so on. Just wondering in terms of how well she adapted, her social circle, the friends, I think it's a different, vibrant
That's a
place.
huge win.
Yeah.
That's a
She
huge
loved
win.
it when she came back here, right? So she realized you don't have to strap up yourself in the car. She can sit there, right? And the lunch scene and all was very vibrant here. Like her school had a cafeteria. Of course, she used to take lunch from home, but if she didn't like it, she could go to the cafe. We're vegetarian. So the cafeteria lunch was a big thing for her. And I think she immediately identified that people look like her. And there is, I mean, she was not sure what it is, but she knew that culturally there was a lot of similarities, right? Accent wise and all. By end of second grade, she was completely, acclimatized to this. She'd made a huge gang of friends, and it was a big win for her from where the way we
for
saw.
her, it was a big win.
Yeah.
So she's like very happy, and So
when she looks back, she says, "See, you guys, my second grade. I think it took me a little bit of time, but I really didn't." But because even in the US, I think she was in a Montessori for the first 3 years, and then she had to transition into the public school system for her first grade. So that first grade, she was not too happy there, right? So when she came here to second grade, it's all relative, right? Her perspective was her second grade was so much better than her first grade. So from there on, I think it was a big plus for her. And I think she was able to adapt really well here.
So one thing I would say, Avinash, this is not related to the children, but it's a but one thing I would say, especially to people my age who have, who are considering the move back, it's people's perspectives. The perspectives have changed considerably in the workforce. It is not the same. People's approach to work and how the profession, the perspectives are completely different. It's like it's a new generation. It's like it's really nice. And I would say it's like, it is all very good. So I would say that that's definitely something to. I mean, it's important to not think about the perspective of the workforce like 20 years ago, and then think that the workforce is the same again. It's very, very different. It's very different.
And the other thing is, right, the East Coast company, I don't know what the West Coast company culture in the US was like, but I still work for a financial company here whose headquarters is on the East Coast. And I would say that the average age of the IT employee in the US, in India, is much younger than the average age of the IT person in the US, at least along the East Coast, right? So I find that, so they have a much more vibrant, energetic attitude towards life here. And that's another thing which I think is a big positive. Sometimes it used to, the kind, like I remember they had some cultural event at work, and they had this whole some kind of a thing, which was a song and dance thing, which you don't really do in the US when you have Christmas parties and all. They tend to be more sober, or I don't know if sober is the right term. Things can be a little bit more vibrant here because it's a younger crowd and it's a different culture. So those may seem a little new to you, or, it'll take getting used to, but I still think if you have an open mind, you would be able to mix well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Sounds like I think she's having a blast, and then she enjoyed the the transition life. Yeah. So now switching gears a little bit.
Daughter,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so switching gears a little bit. So how has been your social life, and the quality of life since the move? So just wondering on that in terms of how how has it been going for you, like social life, day-to-day life, and so on?
So personality wise, I mean, it's so I would say, so again that depends on person to person, because I'm more of I'm slightly introverted. So I guess both of us are slightly introverted. But with that said, we have like a lot more, there's a chance for me to connect with old friends here. There's a chance for me to actually, yeah, I would say it has definitely been it's been an improvement for sure. It's definitely been an improvement for sure. Yes.
Yeah. For me, I would say it's more or less stayed the same, right? I mean, because I think if I look at most friends my age, they're all in the US, many of them, big bulk of them, right? And even after I moved back, a few of my friends who were working in Bangalore moved to moved to the US.
But I think
So,
this will become more relevant when you actually retire, because at
Yeah.
that point of time, this becomes important. Like they say, it's said that financial planning is one part of retirement. The other part is the social, what you do with your time and the opportunities you have for engagement and being engaged, and having a full life beyond in your retirement, right? So that is something that what you just brought up becomes very relevant when you want to retire. And I think it becomes I do believe that it will be the case. I think personally, I think we are better positioned for that.
Got it. So
one thing which I do miss about the US though is when
I think you're
though I
just
know
like
you
almost like taking a cue before I even asked the question. I was just about to ask the question, are there any things that you miss in US? And then you just started. So yes,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
why I
Yes,
was like,
I miss the vast green spaces. You could go for walks out in the woods. The library system there was fantastic. And the kind of extracurricular activities and the exposure which I was able to give my child there, right? Like you could do, I think I took her for what is the thing which we went for?
Swimming.
Not the swim. Yeah, you had these recreational centers which were run by the county, which were really good. If you look at the quality of the swimming pools there and all, it was outstanding. I mean, I've seen a few here, but I think what you get there for free itself, the quality is much better. And if you want an equivalent quality here, you're looking at paying quite a steep fee for that. And in terms of books and the library system there, I don't think we have such a thriving system here. And again, the kind of classes, extracurricular activities I could put her up. What was the thing where she went, Rajiv? That ice skating, and a lot of the small things like the little gym and those type of things. They're picking up here maybe because now that my daughter is no longer that age, I felt that what was available for you for free there was really premium, and you sort of when you come back here, you really miss out those open spaces, the kind of facilities which you took for granted, which the county gave you out of the box. I think those were things which, and I missed the fall season there. I mean, it's really nice. Those colors are very nice. And yeah, I missed that. And US had a different kind of diversity, right? It was like a melting pot for a lot of cultures from all over the world. So you still somehow there is that aspect. But then I think the internet and with access to social media, you get to hear different voices wherever you sit, regardless of where you sit or not. But I still think that being a melting pot, you had to really develop an open mind to mix there. And I think that was something that diversity is also something I think which I miss here sometimes once in a while. And I think the work-life balance there, which you have is relatively much, much better than the work-life balance you have in India. If you look at the work-life culture, I like the US culture still a little better than what I have here. And then in terms of the commute, I think the travel, the roads and the commute here can be very painful. And this is me, and I stay he works remotely from home. So the commute is not a factor for him. But for me, I stay 6 kilometers from work and I just drive to work and come back home. And that's like a 30-minute commute for me each way. But when I see some of my coworkers and all, it's like the average seems to be 1 to 1.5 hours each way for them. So if I look at that commute and all over time, it can take its toll and on your quality of life. We stay in a way, and where my job is, the commute doesn't hurt me, but I see that it hurts a vast majority of my coworkers. So those things are still downsides here. I mean, India is still a developing country, infrastructure and everything is not where it needs to be, right? In terms of supporting the individual well. So I think those are still things where there's a lot of room for improvement in our country.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. Again, I think it's a lot of valuable and perspective information there. So, are there any topics that we haven't covered, that we haven't touched base, that you would like to, bring up or talk through?
I'm not, I don't know. If there's anything specific you wanted to ask, you can ask us and we're glad to.
Okay, sure. I think I kind of touched on the, kids, career, anything, I think on the cost of living from a financial side, anything that you want to touch? I mean, anything that you want to
yeah,
share?
great question. Great question. India's inflation, I don't know. I think in the US last few years, from what my sister and our relatives tell us, inflation there is also creeping up. And in India, inflation is a different ballgame altogether, right? Cost of health, like if you look at inflation of healthcare costs, it's almost 15%, right? And if you look at food and groceries, you're looking at like roughly 5 to 7% year on year. So inflation is something which you need to think about and factor in. And so, when you went from India here, if you say you had a dosa for, 20 rupees when you were in 2004 or 2005, to get a good quality dosa now, it's probably $100 or a little bit more, or $120 or something like that, right? So inflation can be a big killer here, and you need to make sure that your long-term financial planning takes that inflation into consideration. And you should, that's a big factor in your overall financial planning. And yeah, I mean, in terms of owning, I think it helped that, we already had a house here when we moved back. So we didn't have to buy a house and go through that process. So our perspective, we may not be able to offer much perspective there. It helped us definitely that we had a nice house in a good part of the city. So that really helped our transition. And like I said, our kid's school was just half a kilometer across. So she still doesn't know what travel or traffic in India is like, because her whole life in India is around the 2-kilometer, 3-kilometer radius of where we live.
Yeah, I would say, Avinash, but that I think is like I think if there's one thing that people should factor in, I mean, it may seem trivial and it may seem like, a small thing, but I do think that making sure that you do account for the commute to work, if you're going to work, that is, if you're going into office for work, that is like a huge deal.
That's a big chunk of your time.
Because it's 3 hours a day. It can be as bad as 3 hours a day, and it's not just the time. It's energy that you lose, that you have to recover from the commute, and you have to. There is a lot of that is something that you need to factor into your plan after when you make the transition back, right? So it may be as simple as a remote work arrangement. It could be as simple as just coming in, going in when during off traffic, or like when the traffic is not there, and leaving. So it could be something like that. But whatever it is, it's kind of like planning for something as small as that can help.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't underestimate the traffic in India. And it's not only the time, as you mentioned, right? It's the stress, because it's all the hustle and bustle that you have to go through while driving to the work or coming back from the work, which is like you have to pay extra attention and cautious because people will be coming on different states and so on. So that puts a lot more effort. So
diversity of traffic there. You have you'll have a dog, a buffalo, a motorbike, an auto rickshaw. Somebody from work when he came from USA, I said, no, I don't do amusement parks anymore. Just going to work and coming back is like a amusement park ride. Some of those traffic rides can be as thrilling as that.
Cool. Is there any advice for the future aspirants who are thinking about moving back to India?
I mean, I would say that there is a window. I mean, you don't do the analysis paralysis. Avoid the analysis paralysis. I mean, because that if you miss the bus, you miss the bus. I mean, it's but it's there are two sides to it. Don't do it without the analysis, but also don't do too much of analysis.
Yeah, I mean, that's important. Action is plays much more important than the planning, and very well said. So yeah, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your story and for your insights. It's really helpful. I mean, especially for somebody who lived there for 20 years and 10 years here, and going through the different phases of the life. And wish you all the best. And thanks again for sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having us,
Thanks
Avinash.
for having us, Avinash. Bye.
Thank you all for joining us on this insightful journey of Desi Return. If you enjoyed this episode and want to explore more stories and expert advice, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts and experiences. By the way, check out the links in the description below for our Facebook group and social media for updates and engaging discussions, as well as connecting with fellow Desi Returners. Thank you once again, and until next time, may your Desi Return journey be filled with joy, growth, and endless possibilities.